In 30 BC, a Roman soldier walked into the greatest civilization on Earth, planted a flag, and said, "This is ours now." The woman who tried to stop him, the last ruler of ancient Egypt, was found dead in her chamber the very same day. No battle wounds, no struggle, just 2 tiny marks on her arm. And with that, 3,000 years of pharaohs, pyramids, gods, and cats was over. That is where this story ends. Here is everything that happened before that moment. And trust me, it is considerably weirder than you.
Before we go anywhere, a few things you are going to want to know about. One of their most important gods got chopped into 14 pieces, scattered across the entire country. His wife reassembled all 14 pieces and brought him back to life. He then became ruler of the afterlife. We will get to that. Also, the Great Pyramid of Giza was the tallest structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years, built without a single crane, truck, or power tool. The workers were not slaves. They had paid wages, free food, and access to medical care. Ancient Egypt had better worker benefits than some modern companies.
To understand Egypt, you need to understand one thing first: the river. The Nile is the longest river in the world, running north for over 4,000 miles. And every single year, without fail, it flooded. When it flooded, it left behind a thick layer of dark, impossibly fertile soil, right in the middle of one of the largest deserts on Earth. The Egyptians called it the Black Land. They called the desert the Red Land. The Black Land gave you life. The Red Land would kill you within a week. And so, naturally, people showed up. Lots of them. By around 5000 BC, farming communities were established along the Nile. They grew into towns, towns became cities, cities became kingdoms. And then, around 3100 BC, a king called Narmer unified the entire Nile Valley into one single kingdom. How do we know? Because he had it carved onto a giant stone pallet for all of history to see. Ancient rulers had absolutely zero chill about self-promotion. This moment is where historians mark the beginning of ancient Egypt as a civilization.
And at the center of everything was the pharaoh, not just a king. The pharaoh was considered a living god, a divine bridge. During his life, he was embodiment of Horus. When he died, he became Osiris. This was very convenient if you were the pharaoh. Everything belonged to you. The land, the crops, the animals, the people, the cats, everything. You existed to serve the pharaoh. You built his stuff, and you looked grateful about it. In return, the pharaoh promised to maintain Mot. Mot meant truth, balance, and cosmic harmony. If the pharaoh failed, the gods would punish everyone. It was a spectacularly one-sided deal. And somehow, it worked for 3,000 years. Some pharaohs were extraordinary. Some were children who died young. And at least one was a woman who ruled as king for over 20 years and pretended to be a man to do it. We will come back to her.
Now, the gods. There were over 2,000 of them. 2,000. Egyptian religion was sprawling, contradictory, and constantly evolving mythology. Here are the ones you actually need to know. Ra, the god of the sun. Ra was the most important thing that existed in a desert civilization, depending on seasons. Each day, Ra sailed across the sky in a solar bark. Each night, he descended into the underworld and had to fight his way back. Every sunrise was a victory. Now, Osiris. Osiris was originally the god of fertility and agriculture. He was also king of the gods and ruler of all Egypt. His brother Set was jealous. So Set murdered Osiris. And then, to make absolutely sure, he chopped the body into 14 pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Now, Osiris had a wife. Her name was Isis, and Isis did not accept this. She searched the entire country, found every single piece, reassembled her husband, and through divine magic, brought him back to life. Osiris could no longer rule the living, so he became ruler of the afterlife instead, which, in Egyptian belief, was not a demotion. Egyptian mythology had absolutely no chill whatsoever. Anubis, the jackal head, ran the afterlife. As jackals were seen near burial sites, so Egyptians made them divine. He oversaw mummification, guided souls to the afterlife, and presided over the weighing of the heart. We will get to the weighing of the heart. It involves a monster. Sobek. Sobek had a crocodile head, and because the Nile was full of crocodiles, you do not fight them. You worship them. Crocodiles in certain temples were kept as sacred animals and given gold jewelry, which is honestly the correct approach.
So moving on, the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, 481 feet tall, 2.3 million stones, built in approximately 20 years, without cranes, without trucks, without power tools of any kind. Recent research suggests the stones were moved using wooden sledges, water lubrication, and an internal ramp system. And here is the part that will genuinely surprise you. The workers were not slaves. We know this because we found their village with bakeries, breweries, medical facilities, and evidence of regular meat consumption. They were organized into rotating crews with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkar. The workers who built the pyramids ate better than the average ancient person. They were buried with honor near the pyramids they built. So why build a pyramid at all? Because the pharaoh needed somewhere to go after death. The pyramid was not just a tomb, it was a resurrection machine. Its shape mimicked the primordial mound of creation, and packed with everything they would need: gold, food, furniture, and, unfortunately, sometimes their servants. They stopped doing that eventually and switched to small figurines called shoptis. And the pyramid was just the most dramatic version of this idea. Over 100 pyramids, some still standing, some collapsed, some we are still finding.
Now, death. The Egyptians were somewhat obsessed with it. Not because they feared death, but because they believed death was not the end. It was a transition, a journey, another phase of existence. But only if your body survived, and only if you passed the test. The test. The Hall of Two Truths. Anubis was there. So was Osiris. And so was a creature called Ammit. Ammit had the head of a crocodile, the front body of a lion, and the back end of a hippopotamus. Your heart was placed on a scales and weighed against the feather of Ma'at. If your heart was light, eternal paradise. The field of reeds, eternal life, all the beer and bread you could want. If your heart was heavy, Ammit ate your heart, and you ceased to exist entirely. No pressure. To prepare for this journey, the body needed to be preserved. This is mummification. The process took 70 days. First, all internal organs were removed and stored in canopic jars. The brain was considered unimportant. It was removed through the nose, with a hook. The body was then dried with natron salt for 40 days, wrapped in hundreds of meters of linen, covered in amulets, placed in a wooden coffin, placed in a stone sarcophagus, and finally sealed in the tomb. Alongside food, furniture, clothes, tools, games, and, occasionally, the pharaoh's actual servants. They stopped doing that eventually, which was considerably better for everyone involved.
3,000 years.
A lot of pharaohs, a lot of stories. Here are two you cannot skip. Hatshepsut. Around 1479 BC, a woman named Hatshepsut became pharaoh. She was the wife of Thutmose II. When he died, his son by another woman was too young to rule, so Hatshepsut ruled as regent. And then, simply kept going. She wore the double crown. She wore the ceremonial beard. She ruled for over 20 years. By almost every measure, her reign was successful. After she died, her successor had her name chiseled off monuments. For 3,000 years, history forgot she existed. In 1822, when scholars deciphered hieroglyphics, she came back. Akhenaten. Around 1350 BC, a pharaoh did something nobody had ever done before. He banned most of the gods. He declared that there was only one true god, the Aten, the disk of the sun. He closed temples, moved the capital, put his own face everywhere. This lasted about 17 years. When he died, his successors reversed everything almost immediately. His son, a young pharaoh, died young and was buried in a small tomb nobody thought important enough to loot properly. That pharaoh's name was Tutankhamun.
Egypt lasted an extraordinary amount of time, but eventually everyone wanted a peace. The Assyrians invaded in the 7th century BC. The Persians came in 525 BC. And then in 332 BC, Alexander the Great arrived from Greece. Egypt said, "Fine, you are our pharaoh now." Alexander visited the oracle at Siwa, made offerings, and was declared son of the god Amun. When Alexander died, without naming a clear successor, his generals fought over his empire. Egypt went to a general named Ptolemy. The Ptolemaic dynasty ruled for the next 300 years. Macedonian Greeks who kept the pharaonic traditions for political reasons. The last ruler was Cleopatra VII. Yes, that Cleopatra. Cleopatra was extraordinary by any measure. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to actually learn the Egyptian language. She also spoke 8 other languages. She was a skilled politician who understood Egypt's only hope was negotiating from strength. She allied with Julius Caesar. When Caesar was assassinated, she allied with Mark Antony. Together, Antony and Cleopatra tried to create a power base strong enough to rival Rome. They failed. At the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Antony retreated to Egypt and died. Cleopatra negotiated, then understood there was nothing left to negotiate. In 30 BC, Cleopatra was found dead in her chamber.
No wounds, just 2 small marks on her arm. The ancient historians say she died by snakebite, a cobra, the royal symbol of Egypt. Whether that is true, nobody knows for certain. Egypt became a Roman province. 3,000 years of pharaohs ended not with a battle, but with a soldier and a flag.
Ancient Egypt. 1 river, hundreds of gods, over 100 pyramids, 30 dynasties. They gave us writing, mathematics, architecture, medicine, the calendar. They built structures that are still standing 5,000 years later. And they worshipped cats, which was honestly the most sensible decision they ever made. Next time, ancient Greece, where philosophers invented logic and immediately used it to argue with each other, and where one man drank poison rather than change his mind. See you in the past.